Brain injuries are invisible, but just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you or someone you know has gone through brain injury. There's a new study that has been done just this year that the Brain Injury Association of America has shared that 1 in 4, 25% of adults in the US have a history of traumatic brain injury. And it is so important that we come together to use our voices to bring more awareness, especially here in Brain Injury Awareness Month. But also, we can use our voices to be a beacon of hope. Today's theme is Voices of Hope. There is always hope, and you are not alone. Hi, I'm Cristabelle Braden, and this is my brain injury podcast, Hope Survives. This is an uplifting podcast to bring hope to your darkest days. As a survivor of traumatic brain injury and multiple concussions and re-injuries, I know what it's like to struggle to find hope. I don't want anyone to feel as alone as I did, and that's why over 10 years ago, I started an online community called Hope After Head Injury, which has now launched into a nonprofit organization called Hope Survives. Hope Survives envisions a world in which every survivor of brain injury and every member of their family are seen, loved, heard, valued, supported, uplifted, and never alone. This podcast is an extension of that, and I'd love to invite you to join along as we explore the realities of life with brain injury, with messages of encouragement, interviews with doctors and professionals, and survivor and family stories. No matter where you're at on your journey, there is always hope.
With a little hope, you can make it through today. With a little faith, someday you'll get through the pain. Just a little love is enough to light the way through your darkest night. Hope survives. A little faith, a little love. Hope survives.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to Hope Survives podcast. We are here at the start of season 4, and this is our first podcast season as a brand new nonprofit organization. I have been doing brain injury support and resources for the last 10 years, offering support groups, online spaces of encouragement, speaking at brain injury conferences. I started this podcast about 5 years ago, and now we have finally grown into this nonprofit. I am so grateful for all of your support who have been here on the journey for so many years. And if you're new, welcome to the family. We are so glad that you are part of the Hope Survives family. We have a whole bunch of new support groups, expanded offerings that we shared last week in our live stream launch celebration. So in the last episode of the podcast, you may have heard the recording of our live stream launch. That video is available to watch on our website, hopesurvives.org/podcast. You can go to episode number 99, live stream launch celebration, and watch the video, or you can listen to it here on your podcast feeds. We are so grateful. It's also on YouTube and Facebook as well. We do have new social media. So if you search Hope Survives on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, new pages are here because Hope Survives is doing something new. And Brain Injury Awareness Month couldn't be a better time to launch this new organization. We are so grateful for all of you, our listeners who've been part of the journey. I can't thank you enough. In my own brain injury recovery, a lot of the ups and downs have been chronicled on this podcast as I've shared very personally a lot of what I've gone through in my recovery. And having now lived more of my life with a brain injury than without one, I deeply feel the invisibleness of the brain injury because you can't tell by looking at me when I'm having a bad day, unless you know me well. But I still have so many struggles. My right side of my body, my hand doesn't always work right. I struggle with my balance. I have flare ups, dysautonomia, vestibular dysfunction. It has been improving over time, and I'm so grateful for the strides, but there is also a lot of setbacks. And so today, our hope is to encourage you that you are not alone on your journey. You are going to hear from Tameka Wolfe, who is the vice president of our board of Hope Survives, who you met last week in the live stream launch celebration. But today she's going to share some of her story. She is the facilitator of our brand new group called Hope for Couples, and her husband is a survivor of a brain injury. So today she is going to be a voice for hope here on this podcast. And we also have stories of hope that are being shared on our website at hopesurvives.org. And so I highly recommend you take a look at them and be encouraged by others that are going through this. The biggest thing that we hope that you know is that you're not alone. So we want to thank you all for being on this journey. We are also deeply, deeply grateful to the sponsors who help make our mission possible. Their support ensures that survivors and families receive the resources they need. And we would like to highlight and thank our sponsor, the Functional Neurology Center. The FNC's personalized neuro recovery programs offer hope for those suffering from brain injuries, dysautonomia, vestibular, chronic pain, stroke, movement dysfunction, developmental disorders, PPPD, FND, and complex post-concussion. Dr. Jeremy Schmo is the founder of the Functional Neurology Center. He has been on this podcast before. You might have heard him last March in season 3, talking about new technologies and research in brain injury recovery. And he's going to be back on the podcast in just a couple weeks to share more with us. So we are so grateful to Dr. Schmo and the FNC for sponsoring us and being part of Hope Survives, because their motto says there is hope. And we believe there is always hope and that you're not alone going through brain injury. The reason that I started something called Hope Survives is because, 10 years ago, I wrote a song called Hope Survives. And I wrote that song because I know what it's like to struggle to find hope. There have been so many days that I have felt hopeless, that I've felt discouraged. I never want anyone else to feel that way. So the song Hope Survives is the theme song. You hear it, you heard it in the podcast intro, but it's more than that to me. I mean, it's kind of like I process through songwriting. Some of you might know, or maybe not know, part of my story that I never wrote a song before my brain injury, and writing songs and music was a huge part of my recovery. Playing guitar, strumming the guitar helped my right arm movement. Singing helped my speech. And writing songs helped me to learn how to express myself after I really struggled with aphasia and expressing emotions and frontal lobe damage, and just really, really I was all over the place all the time, but writing music was the one place where it felt like things sort of made sense. And so I started processing my brain injury through songs, and I have a couple albums out. And I realized just a couple weeks ago that it was 10 years ago this month that I wrote the song Hope Survives. So how full circle, for exactly 10 years later, we are launching a nonprofit with the same name. If you would have told me that 10 years ago, I never would have ever thought that this would be where we would end up. And so I would love to invite you to join for a live stream concert celebration. We are hosting a concert, Hope Survives concert, on March 15th, next Saturday. If you're listening to this live, if you're listening to it later, we might still, I'm not sure what we're going to do afterwards. So hopefully you're hearing this in time, but there will be many more concerts. So visit hopesurvives.org to get all the updated information, just as a general rule of thumb. But if you are listening to this as it's releasing, our concert information is available at hopesurvives.org/concert. And you can either come in person in Pennsylvania, or you can watch the live stream, and it is available for a playback if you register ahead of time. So we're so grateful and thankful for just being part of everything that we have going on with our new nonprofit. We also have open volunteer positions. We mentioned a lot of that last week in the live stream. So you'll have to check that out for a lot more of those details and our new support groups and workshops. And I can't express how grateful I am to have a team behind us. All that being said, thank you for listening. And I hope this episode is encouraging to you as we talk with Tameka about her story and about hope. Remember, you're not alone. And let's get into today's conversation called Voices of Hope. I am so excited to be here with Tameka Wolfe, who is the Vice President of the Board on Hope Survives. Tameka, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
It's such a pleasure to be here. I am so overwhelmed and I'm so excited to be here today.
Well, thank you for being willing to share some of your story and who you are. For our theme this week is called Voices of Hope. And so I just want to start by saying, like, what does hope mean to you?
Hope means that there is almost like light at the tunnel. It is uplifting knowing that whatever the situation, whatever is going on, there is a calm that will come as you go through to kind of just keep focused, to stay focused on the light ahead, and know that there's hope.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's really what we're doing here with Hope Survives, right? So share a little bit of your background and why you decided to join our board.
Absolutely. So I work in nonprofit healthcare. It's actually it's almost like a full circle moment in what I do professionally, in terms of saving lives through organ transplants, through transplantation. And so I have been working with a nonprofit, local nonprofit, through organ and tissue donation for 17 years. And so when my husband had his head injury, it was a surreal moment because I totally understood in that moment what was going on. And it was scary at the same time because, as I said before, I work with on the opposite end of things where unfortunately, the patients that I typically work with don't survive their injuries, but are able to leave a legacy through transplantation. My passion for being a part of Hope Survives is as a caregiver, wanting to help to share in those experiences and learn how to be a better caregiver, how to be able to be a resource to others. I mean, really, it's a passion, and to really be a testimony to those who have survived, just like my husband, a head injury. I think it's really important to provide hope to others, and share in that journey with other people. So that's what brought me to Hope Survives.
Thank you so much. I have to tell you guys all, Tameka is a gem. You are such a blessing to be part of Hope Survives. Not only your experience, which is incredibly helpful to our board that you have some nonprofit experience, but more than that, it's your heart and your faith and your resilience and just the light that shines out of you. And I'm so grateful to have you as our vice president because the world needs more of that. And through Hope Survives, this month is our launch month, right? So we're getting started, but I'm so excited to see what the Lord is going to do through everything. So
Truly.
thank you for your yes.
It's almost like a calling. I mean, even as a minister, it is a calling. It's definitely a calling. And when the Holy Spirit leads you in a way, it's so amazing how that happens and how there's those divine connections, if you will. And certainly being a part of Hope Survives feels like a divine connection to me. So
Feels
Yeah.
like that to me too to have you here. So thank you. So I wanted to ask you to share some of your story. Can you talk a little bit about your family, what your family life was maybe like before the injury, what happened at the injury, and we'll kind of just move
Yeah.
forward through there?
So it was interesting. So I almost lose track. I think Thomas and I, we were married for 7 years. We're both very driven people. So we almost were like two ships that passed in the night. Like, he would work 16-hour days and I would work almost the same. And we would be purposeful, if you will, about vacation time because that was the time for us to connect. And so I never forget, I knew something was wrong leading up to Thomas's head injury because he took off from work because he wasn't feeling well. And that was like, he never, ever took off from work. Like he could be just absolutely sick. And working in law enforcement, that's pretty common. And he was very passionate about his job because he spent his career helping people as a probation and parole officer for the state. And everyone to this day, they reach out to him and they loved him. So leading up to the injury, he wasn't feeling well. And I kept saying, you have to go to the hospital. You have to like go see a doctor. And of course, as a man, some men just, he did not want to go. And I never forget, this went on for like a week or a week and a half. And the night he came home, he lay down for about an hour and he said, call the ambulance. I can't breathe.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh my God. So this was like almost midnight. And so of course I called the ambulance and they rushed him to the hospital. And I thank God for favor because our local hospital is a hospital that I work with. And so I was very familiar with the staff. But even then, when we got there, we waited for some time. And as he was in the trauma bay, he still couldn't breathe. They were doing breathing treatments, and he got very anxious and had a seizure and coded. And so I tell people, when you witness that, you can watch Grey's Anatomy. I love those shows, ER and all of the medical shows. And so, you see someone and they cardiac arrest on TV, but to witness that in person and to see a loved one have that cardiac arrest, it is, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. It was the most frightening thing that I've ever witnessed. And I'm so grateful to God that I was able to call like the president of the hospital and was like, it's Tameka and I need you to come here now. Like, and everyone knew me. He coded for, it's about between 6 to 8 minutes, honestly. And to see like a flat line, again, it was surreal. And so I was hysterical. They brought him back and, I had a meeting with the same people who were helping me like that next day scheduled. And they were like, the experience to this day, I couldn't believe it. And, they were very, accommodating, but to make those decisions in terms of, ventilator support, and not understanding what was going on in the moment because I guess I was more or less traumatized, understanding the medical side of things. But to make decisions very quickly, it was very overwhelming. But again, I remain really grateful to the neurologist and the nurse managers and everyone. I felt like I was amongst family helping me and providing support for my husband. My husband was in the ICU for 6 weeks. It was the longest 6 weeks ever. And the reason for that was we didn't know what had caused his throat to swell up to cause him not to breathe. And he did go to the urgent care center the day before he came home and took tests. And they were calling while he was in the hospital to say, it was strep throat. So, long story short, as a result of strep throat, which brought on the anoxic injury, was a long journey ahead. That's the abbreviated version, I guess, the long story. I was very adamant and prayerful at the same time in terms of ensuring that Thomas would have the appropriate support once he was discharged from the ICU into a facility, a rehab facility. I think that his stay may not have been as long as it was if I was not very intentional and adamant about him being placed in the right support group. And I'm glad I was that way. But helping him to recover, to see someone who's vibrant, who's energetic, to then learn how to walk again. And it was so funny. I never forget, right before he left the ICU, they were showing him how to like talk with the trach, like to put his finger over the trach and talk. And it was like, once he knew he could talk like that, he never shut up from then. But it was like 6 weeks, like 5 weeks of nothing. Like he couldn't talk, and I would like try to talk to him, and he would talk to me literally through his eyes. I do believe you could talk to someone like with your eyes, and so I would talk to him, and he would nod his head and like give me eye movements to show that he was in agreement. But when I first saw him like could talk, and I was just like, oh my gosh, and he never shut up after that. And so now his story is that I can't shut him up. Like he went 5 weeks without being able to talk, and he will never, ever, as long as he can talk, as long as God gives him a voice, he will speak all the time. So it's a wonderful thing. But yeah, it's too funny. Yeah, and just learning how to do all of those things. It, it was it was challenging again to go through the therapies, and even from a professional stance, I'm so used to hearing or even delivering great prognosis. But as I teach, all right, so I spent my career in teaching neurologists, quite frankly, how to talk to patients. And I never forget. And when Thomas was in the hospital, one of the neurologists called me and gave me the results of his scans, and I knew this neurologist professionally, but when he called me to deliver the news, it was so cold, quite honestly. And I couldn't believe it because I hear people who had that experience, but to have it made me even more compassionate now professionally as I teach physicians on how to give great prognosis and how to just communicate with families. And so I knew that happened for a reason. Definitely.
Mm,
When you think about what I do and what happened to me, I'm a living witness that the way that you deliver and just bedside manner goes a long way to that family who's had a like a traumatic experience, like their whole world has changed. um so that helped me professionally, certainly, but I also am grateful because while he gave me that great prognosis, I also called another neurologist friend of mine and said, okay, let's look at these scans again, because I was in denial, and I understand how families feel. So when I encounter a family who may say, you don't know what this feels like, oh, I do. I absolutely understand what
yeah.
it feels like in that scenario. And so the journey to recovery has been uh, a journey, but we were told that this would be a marathon and not a sprint. And so as we go through this journey, Thomas will remind me, and I will remind him, that this is a marathon and not a sprint. And the
Yeah.
journey continues.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing. I learned more about your journey even after having heard some of your guys' story before. Can you share what your guys' life is like now? I know you're still in the
Wow.
relatively early stages. I know it probably feels like a lifetime, but how many years ago was the injury now?
So if it's in May, it'll be 3 years this year. So that's what,
Okay.
24, 23, 22, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So in the
Yeah.
last almost 3 years, right? He's made a lot of progress. But you guys are still on that marathon journey, right? So what does your life look like now?
Wow. So we start the alarm clock goes off every day at 4:55 daily.
Ooh, early.
4:55. Ah, I should be getting in the bed. So 4:55 we get up and we go to the gym. And so I, even before his injury, I like to cycle. And I'm so grateful for my cycle community. So I cycle with a retired doctor who immediately when Thomas was discharged just volunteered to help Thomas at the gym. And so ever since we go to the gym in the morning and I'll do cycle and now he does weights and he'll walk around the gym and then it's followed by he'll go either to a clubhouse where he really they love him, so he participates at Moss Clubhouse, and so they go through topics every day. He likes to lead the group.
Mhm. And a
With
clubhouse
different
is a brain injury day program for
yes, and
those who may
mhm.
not know what that means. So
Yeah,
that's great. He has that community.
he does. He loves it. And then I go to work, and then I pick him up, and then sometimes we go back to the gym and we have well, actually, I forgot that we do start our day off, obviously, with morning prayer. But, there's a myriad of things that we do on a daily basis. In addition to just the clubhouse and work and gym, he is excited about being an usher at church that he just started. So,
Oh, that's great.
I know it's
Yeah.
so exciting.
Well, you guys have had to learn how to cope with symptoms, right?
Yes.
And like just
So it's like journaling, right? So it's really cool that he, like the last 2 weeks, he's actually been comfortable and confident to write in his journal.
and
So
that's new?
before that, that's new. That just started in
Oh,
the last
wow.
2 weeks. Like that just started like the last 2 weeks. And so it's amazing because before then he would like record journal entries on his phone. I'm so grateful for technology, right? And so it's those prompts. We have a whiteboard and so we list like things that we have to do like for the day and it'll be like little prompts like drink water. Just little things. Get up and walk around. Like, don't sit for longer than an hour without getting up and walking around.
I love that.
He
So you have whiteboards so he
Yes.
remembers and
Yes.
you've implemented some strategies. And I love that you go to the gym every day. Routine is so good for brain
Mhm,
injury survivors. Like
mhm,
we need routine in order to
mhm.
function.
Absolutely. Yeah, and he'll be like, "Okay, so what do we have today?" And so I love for technology because, when I schedule his doctor's appointments, I'll put it on my Apple phone and then it sends it to him. So he'll have a reminder on his phone. And now he's reminding me like, "Oh, I go to the doctor tomorrow." And I'm like, "Yes, you do," because I almost forgot. So there's those
Wow.
reminders.
So
Yeah.
you've learned how to implement more strategies, and obviously we don't have too much time to talk today. I'd love to talk more about this in the future and even have you and Thomas both on
Yeah.
sometime. That would be really fun. But as you're sharing about this, that journaling thing is so beautiful, and I just want to encourage survivors and caregivers
Mhm.
listening that the brain, we talk about this before, we talk about this a lot, and I talk about it a lot on the podcast, but the brain has neuroplasticity. The Lord has created it to be able to rewire and reroute. And where our theme is voices of hope, right? Tameka, you are a voice of hope, sharing your story. But Thomas is learning how to use his voice. I love the story you gave of him learning how to speak again after
Yes.
being in the ICU. So, like, literally his voice. And now he's journaling. That's a
Mhm,
new way to use his voice. And
mhm,
so, learning how to use your voice to share hope is a journey. And for
mhm,
all of us listening, like maybe you're not ready to share your full story, and that's okay, but maybe you can share an encouraging word with someone else. Maybe that's your hope for today. So,
mhm.
Tameka, what encouragement would you have for a caregiver or a family member listening?
I would say offer yourself some grace and know that whatever you don't accomplish in one day, there's always the next day. So, really, just to offer yourself some grace. Sometimes, as caregivers, we want to wear like the big S on our chest and we want to be superheroes. Um, but it's okay not to live up to your superhero duties or, your goals for that day. There's always the next day to pick up where you left off.
That's such good advice. Even for survivors, that's for all of us. Now, what would you want to say to survivors? What hope do you have
I
for them?
will, the same, like, again, I feel like I'm sure it's so cliche, but it really is a marathon. And know that there's small steps, but, it may seem like a small accomplishment, but it's so huge in the large trajectory or the larger picture of the recovery process. So again, it's really like offering yourself some grace. We all want to do so much, but it's in God's timing, certainly. And just those baby steps make so much of a difference.
Yeah, one step at a time.
One step at a time, absolutely.
And that's all we can do. Yeah. I love that. I love that reminder because it's easy to try and want to do everything all at once, or you get an idea for something and then you just want to skip to the end, right?
Right.
But we can't skip the process.
Right.
And maybe hope is found through those little steps.
Yeah, trust the process. Trust the process, right? And go through the process. Absolutely.
So you are starting a group called Hope for Couples. Do you want to talk a little bit about what your hope is for that group?
My hope for that group is to, marriages have their own unique challenges. And certainly when there is a spouse that has a head injury, whether it's sustained during the marriage or as the marriage evolves and the head injury was at they married and the head injury was already pre-existing. I think that it's important to understand the process of the head injury recovery, and learn how to work through those challenges, but maintain the unity of the marriage as you're working through those challenges. I mean, let's face it, there are so many things that stretch a marriage, but I would never want a head injury to my desire. I would love to see that Hope Survive or Hope for Couples are a way of helping couples to navigate that head injury space in a marriage.
Yeah. And navigate it together in the way that's right for them, right? Because every injury is different, every relationship's different.
Yep.
And I love that. So yeah, we're starting with a support group once a month. We have discussed potentially putting in some other programs in the future, guest speakers. There's a lot that we're hoping for, and we're going to start with our discussion group. So if you guys want to sign up for that, Hope for Couples, hopesurvives.org/couples. And Tameka is also a panelist on our Exploring Ambiguous Loss Grief Processing After Brain Injury workshop happening at the end of March/beginning of April. So if you're interested in hearing what she has to share about ambiguous loss and just that grieving, you got to register for the workshop because we're out of time today.
Yeah.
So thank you, Tameka, so much for sharing. Any final word of hope for our listeners?
I guess my final word would be to maintain hope. And it's an active thing to consciously maintain hope every day.
I love that.
Final word. Yes.
I love that. It's active. We can choose hope each day. I love it.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. This has been so great. And like I said, you can connect with Tameka at the Hope for Couples. First meeting is March 18th. It'll be the third Tuesday of each month. You can get connected on our website and register for Exploring Ambiguous Loss Grief Processing After Brain Injury workshop. So you'll hear from her again soon. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Hope Survives podcast. Make sure to subscribe and stay tuned, and would love for you to consider leaving us a rating or a review. Check out hopesurvives.org for more. We'll see you next time, and remember, there is always hope.